Now, let's bring in Daily Telegraph columnist Piers Akerman. Piers, good to see you. Now, a pause in the cash rate at 4.1% does give a breather to the hundreds of thousands of Australians clearly struggling with these rate rises. But economists are already saying it's not going to last and that we can expect probably another 2 rate rises this year.
Well, I'm sure it's short-lived. I think that the pause was necessary and it was quite obvious because we have to see what the June inflation figures are. I think there are 2 real factors playing into this, Sharri. One, of course, is the extraordinary energy price rises, which the Treasurer won't mention because his fellow Cabinet Minister and the Prime Minister both promised everybody that we would see some of the cost of energy go down. In fact, we'd all be $285 better off. And that's just not going to happen. And many Australians are now having to choose between eating and heating. The cost of living pressures aren't being helped by the lack of improvement in the productivity rates. And giving across-the-board wage rises, which the trade union element of the Labor Party insisted upon as a condition for their support, aren't helping either. And quite frankly, the Reserve Bank Board appointees that the government's made, i.e. 2 people from the union movement, people who aren't trained economists, isn't helping that at all.
And you just hope that their next appointment, because we can presume that Phil Lowe is going, and I think he should go, but you hope that the next person that Labor appoints to replace him is truly independent, is truly the best in their field and isn't a political appointee.
Well, one would hope so. One would certainly hope so. But given the propensity of a Labor government to appoint Labor mates, I wouldn't guarantee it at all.
No. Now, the point you make, Piers, though, about productivity is such an important one because we wouldn't be seeing so many aggressive rate rises if the government wasn't pursuing moves like its IR reforms, as you point out, because this is slowing any productivity growth. And we've seen Phil Lowe so many times now really urge the government to get productivity, to lift it, because the wage rises that we're seeing are inflationary unless it's balanced by productivity growth.
Well, the other. Sorry, Sharri.
No, please go ahead.
Yeah, the other inflationary factor here that people aren't talking about it because it is the net zero and all of the billions that are being poured into really useless products, which are demonstrably having zero effect on net zero and absolutely nothing to do with the climate. As you and I both well know, the IPC has yet to blame any of the weather events on climate change. And yet we still see this government committed to a lunatic policy of destroying manufacturing and throwing taxpayers' money at transmission lines and wind and solar, which are doing nothing to bring down the cost of energy.
Now, Piers, I want to ask you about something else. The new Barbie movie, and this is making a lot of publicity at the moment, it's starring the Australian actor Margot Robbie. Well, it's been banned in Vietnam for featuring a map of the South China Sea that shows China's ownership of disputed islands. Of course, Vietnam rejects this map showing China's version of where it would like its territories to be. Piers, this may seem kind of frivolous or even a mistake, but it's actually quite a serious topic because there is a long trend now of Hollywood kowtowing to China. And the American executives of this movie would have known what they were doing because Vietnam has reacted this way before multiple times. I mean, why do you even need a map of Vietnam in a Barbie movie? I can't even, I haven't seen it, but I can't imagine the scene that would need to show a map of these, islands that are subject to the territorial dispute. This is all clearly to appease China. And it's a topic that Andrew Bolt has been very strong on previously, the fact that American movie executives don't want their movies banned in China. So it looks like they've chosen in this instance to annoy Vietnam instead. Well,
this is a very, very important issue, and Hollywood has a long form of kowtowing to dictators. they even had, before the Second World War, they even sent executives to Germany to see how they could produce movies which wouldn't offend Adolf Hitler.
Wow.
I'm not surprised at this at all. China, going back to 1946 and the Kuomintang, has made 3 aggressive grabs across the Pacific. This is what is called the 9-dash line, and it comes from a loop down from the Kamchatka Peninsula right down to Indonesia and back up past the Vietnamese coast, and it takes in the Paracel Islands and the Spratly Islands. And these islands have been disputed. The Chinese have militarized them. They've built airstrips in there and so forth and so on. They've also claimed the second island chain, which cuts right through the Philippines. And there is a third island chain which cuts right through from the Aleutian Islands, which are just off the American coast, down through Honolulu, right down to Tonga and Fiji. So nobody should be surprised. We have to remember that this is the Chinese Communist Party, and it's an aggressive party.
Yes, it is.
And well, it basically the Chinese government is independent because the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, runs the government. It appoints the government. The Chinese government doesn't appoint the party. The PLA is the army of the Chinese Communist Party. And we should be making this distinction loudly and more clearly.
Yes,
Whenever we deal with Chinese or Chinese industries, we're dealing with the Chinese Communist Party.
And we've seen time and time again, and this Barbie movie appears to be the latest example of it, of Hollywood executives bending over backwards to appease, as you say, the Chinese Communist Party, so that their films are broadcast in China, so that they're able to make money rather than just do the democratic thing and don't show a map of China's version of the territorial disputes. And now, yes.
Well, all media in China, including movies, is controlled by the Communist Party.
Exactly. So look, we're watching the Chinese Communist Party version of Barbie, it would seem, if anyone chooses to watch it. Now, the peak body for recruitment and staffing has today warned the Albanese government that it's the IR reforms that we were talking about a moment ago, that they will force hospitals, schools and aged care providers to pay their hired workers even higher wages than their permanent employees. So this is the peak body saying that casual workers will have to be paid more than permanent employees under this IR reform that Tony Burke was calling same pay, same job. He now scrapped that label. What do you think of this?
I think this is a totally lunatic proposition. When you have gig hire people going through contractors, they don't have the permanent jobs. The reason people in permanent jobs get all of these other benefits, but people in the gig economy have a flexibility. Now, there are benefits for both. But when you get a socialist government like this trying to impose a one-size-fits-all, no matter what your experience is in the job, it just makes no sense. And I hope that the Australian people are starting to realise that the scales are starting to fall from their eyes and see that essentially we have a government with an underlying Marxist philosophy here, operating in every sector that it controls.
Look, in New South Wales, there's a really big problem brewing between farmers and the state government. And this is an amazing report today in the Daily Telegraph. New South Wales farmers are accusing the Labor state government of bullying them into acquiring their land for transmission lines as part of a renewable energy target zones. And the problem is that the farmers aren't even, it's a problem enough that they're acquiring their land, Piers, but the problem here is that the farmers aren't even given a say in where these transmission lines should run. And some farmers are saying that where the lines are running is going to affect their growing of crops or their farming land, and it's actually going to cost them money. This is really going to be a bitter dispute, and you've got to feel for those farmers. Can you imagine someone coming into your home and saying, we're running a transmission line here and you get no say about where it's going?
Well, the Labor Party has no understanding of the rural community whatsoever. Let's get that straight. They don't understand how food is produced. By demanding the right to run ridiculous transmission lines to connect up to intermittent power sources, solar, for example, is going to cover vast acres, areas larger than European nations, if it wants to meet net zero, and then it's got to connect it to huge batteries, which have a very short life cycle. In fact, if there was a major blackout in a city the size of Melbourne or Sydney, they'd last an hour and a half at most. Then you have these stupid windmills, which they want to clear ridge tops for, and what we do know is that they shred birds, migratory birds, in enormous numbers. We've seen this across Europe, and a couple of European nations are already dismantling their wind towers because of the damage they're doing to the ecology and the environment.
Yeah. All right. We're out of time, Piers Akerman. So great to see you. Thanks for your time this evening.